Welcome to today's deep dive. Usually, when we talk about history, we're looking at people who spent their entire lives just, you know, clawing their way to the top.
Right, the overly ambitious types.
Exactly. We're drawn to generals conquering territories or politicians scheming for the throne, merchants hoarding incredible wealth. We almost expect a certain relentless ambition from our historical figures.
Yeah, we really
We
want.
assume that, to be remembered centuries later, you have to actively demand to be seen.
It is the dominant narrative, certainly, but it creates this massive blind spot because when you step into the world of medieval devotion and look closely at how geographical identities actually form, that entire aggressive narrative is just turned completely on its head.
Oh, completely.
History is actually full of these profound counterexamples.
Which brings us to our mission for you today. We are taking this really fascinating stack of eclectic sources. I mean, we've got everything from detailed Roman architectural guides and historical encyclopedias to these centuries-old hagiographies.
And for those who might not know, hagiographies are essentially the highly idealized, sometimes wildly exaggerated official biographies of saints.
Right. And we are using these sources to trace a bizarre and honestly beautiful historical thread. We are going to connect a reluctant, ascetic 7th century monk hiding in the snowy French mountains to a stunning Baroque church sitting right in the bustling heart of Rome.
It's a masterclass in the sheer, unpredictable power of unintended consequences. I mean, today's subject proves that sometimes actively running away from power makes you, well, infinitely more famous than embracing it.
Okay, let's unpack this. Imagine like a modern-day executive, right? They spend years climbing the corporate ladder, they finally reach the C-suite, and then one day, they just quit.
Just walk away from it all.
Yeah, they walk away from the massive salary, they move to a cabin entirely off the grid, they refuse to speak to the press, and they, I don't know, eat beans out of a can.
Total isolation.
Exactly. Only to accidentally have an entire major city named after them a few hundred years later. That is exactly the energy we are dealing with here.
It really is.
To understand how this man's name ends up on a Baroque church in Italy, we have to start with the man himself in 7th century France.
Let's set the scene. We are looking at Saint Claude of Besançon. He was born around the year 603 or 607 in a castle in the Franche-Comté region near the Swiss border.
Okay, so a castle. We're talking nobility here.
Oh, absolutely. He came from a noble Gallo-Roman family, the Claudius. This wasn't some peasant forced into the church because he had no other economic options. He was born into immense privilege.
Right.
And his first career path reflected that privilege. For the first 20 years of his life, he served as a border guard.
I want to pause on that for a second because being a border guard in the 7th century isn't like, checking passports at an airport to me.
No, not at all.
He was heavily armed, right? Dealing with constant skirmishes, defending the territory of his noble family. But then he just shifts gears completely. In the year 627, the local bishop appoints him as a canon priest.
And for context, becoming a canon priest meant he was essentially drafted into the administrative and liturgical staff of the local cathedral.
Okay.
He wasn't just a solitary priest in a village somewhere. He was part of the central bureaucratic machinery of the diocese. He was handling church property, assisting the bishop, managing the daily affairs of the church.
Which apparently wasn't isolated enough for him.
Clearly not.
Because eventually, he retreats from that bureaucratic life to become a monk at the Abbey of Condat deep in the Jura Mountains. And when we say he became a monk, the sources tell us he went all in.
Oh, he was an intense ascetic.
Right. We're talking about a guy who ate exactly one frugal meal a day. He spent his time in manual labor, silence, and intense prayer. He just wanted to be left alone with his books and his faith.
But the great paradox of asceticism in the medieval world is that the more you try to disappear, the more people seek you out for your wisdom. Humility functions as a magnet, essentially.
Wow, yeah, I can see that.
Because he was so visibly detached from worldly ambition, the other monks just trusted him implicitly. He ended up being elected the 12th Abbot of Condat.
Even though he didn't want it.
Right, and he didn't just sit in his cell, he actually brought the Benedictine rule to the Abbey.
Let's explain how that works, because, the Benedictine rule sounds like just a spiritual vow, but it's really an operational system, isn't it?
It absolutely is. It is a highly structured framework for communal living. It outlines exactly how many hours monks should spend in prayer, how many in manual labor, and how many reading.
It's basically a daily schedule.
Yes, a very strict one. It enforces absolute obedience and poverty. It transforms the Abbey from a loose gathering of hermits into this disciplined, self-sustaining economic and spiritual powerhouse. Under his reluctant leadership, he built new churches, fed the poor, and the place absolutely thrived.
Which, unfortunately for him, means his reputation only grew. So in 685, the Archbishop of Besançon dies. The local clergy look around, they realize they need a competent leader, so they choose Claude.
And Claude's reaction is to literally run away and hide.
That's just amazing.
He is terrified of the obligations of the office.
But he's discovered, brought back, and totally compelled to take the job.
Yeah, the historical records are clear that he didn't just express, polite hesitation, he actively fled. But duty bound him, so he served as the archbishop for 7 years.
And the sources note he ruled wisely and delivered incredibly powerful sermons during that time.
He did. But after those 7 years, he abdicates. He quits and flees right back to his mountain monastery at Condat.
I look at this guy running from the archbishop role, and I just see, middle management burnout.
You think so?
Yeah. I mean, I think he hated the bureaucracy. It's like being promoted to regional director and realizing you spend all day arbitrating petty disputes and you just miss doing the actual ground level work. What stands out to you about his refusal of power? Is it possible he just couldn't handle the administrative friction?
Well, that modern corporate lens is tempting, but it misses the sheer physical danger and political suffocation of being a 7th century bishop.
Oh, fair enough.
Being an archbishop back then wasn't just a spiritual role. You were a massive political landowner. You were expected to raise armies, collect taxes, and mediate violent disputes between regional warlords.
Okay, yeah, that is way beyond middle management.
Right. For someone whose core identity was built on eating a single frugal meal and seeking silent contemplation, that environment wouldn't just cause burnout, it would feel like spiritual poison.
Wow.
The sources suggest 2 intertwined reasons for his departure. First, an overriding love for solitude. But also, word had reached him that without his leadership, discipline had collapsed back at Condat.
Oh, so he felt he had to go fix it.
Exactly. He chose the localized spiritual calling over the regional political power.
So he goes back to the mountains, he reestablishes those strict Benedictine rules, and eventually dies there in his 90s, around the year 696 or 699.
A very long life for that era.
Yeah, seriously. And this is where our story shifts from his life to his afterlife. Because by returning to that monastery, he cemented his legacy so deeply that he literally wiped previous names right off the map.
Yeah, the Abbey of Condat had already gone through a rebranding, actually. Centuries earlier, it had been renamed Saint-Oyend after Saint Eugendis, the 4th abbot.
And Eugendis was a big deal, right?
Oh, huge. He was a monumental figure who had rebuilt the original wooden monastery in stone during the 5th or 6th century. He was the undisputed local hero.
Right, until Claude's fame completely eclipses him. And the catalyst for this wasn't just Claude's lingering reputation. It was a very physical, visceral discovery.
Yes, it was.
In the year 1160, nearly 500 years after he died, Claude's body was discovered. And the hagiographies and historical records report that it was completely incorrupt.
Right.
The details in the sources are incredibly specific, which is kind of gross but fascinating. They note his bowels were still intact and his joints were still flexible.
Well, in the medieval worldview, an incorrupt body wasn't just a biological curiosity. It was the ultimate, undeniable proof of profound sanctity.
Meaning God stepped in.
Exactly. It meant God had suspended the natural laws of decay for this specific person. And practically speaking, this discovery functioned as an unparalleled economic engine.
Let's dig into that medieval relic economy because it's fascinating. It sparks this massive pilgrimage boom. We read that visitors would expose his bare feet 3 times a day just to kiss them.
You have to understand how a pilgrimage transformed a region. When word spread of an incorrupt saint who could potentially offer miraculous healing, thousands of people started walking to the Jura Mountains.
That all those people need infrastructure.
Right. They needed inns to sleep in, taverns to eat at, blacksmiths to fix their wagons, and, local guides. They bought souvenir badges. They made massive financial donations to the Abbey in exchange for prayers.
So it's a whole industry.
Completely. Physical relics were the primary economic drivers of the era.
Here's where it gets really interesting. By the 13th century, the sheer volume of tourists and pilgrims coming to see Claude was so overwhelming that the town and the abbey permanently changed their name to St. Claude.
Just overwrote the old name completely.
Yeah. It's like, imagine a famous music venue permanently changing its name to the Taylor Swift Arena just because she held a blockbuster residency there.
It's a fun analogy, but unlike a music venue, this wasn't about entertainment.
Right.
This was about localized divine protection. A single saint could completely overwrite a town's original geographic identity because the gravity of the relic was just too strong.
It was a matter of survival for them.
Exactly. The people living there realized their entire livelihood, their safety, and their cultural identity were now intrinsically linked to this 7th century monk.
And that medieval economic engine worked perfectly for centuries, right up until the entire political landscape of France flipped upside down. A town built entirely on monastic relics is going to have a very hard time surviving the modern era, specifically the French Revolution.
Well, even before the Revolution, the religious landscape was shifting. In 1723, the Abbey was secularized.
Let's clarify what secularized means in this context, because it doesn't mean they turned it into a government building.
Correct. It means the institution was transformed into a collegiate of canons.
Okay.
So the cloistered monks who took vows of poverty and lived under the strict Benedictine rule were replaced by secular clergy. These were priests who did not take monastic vows, who could own private property, and who managed the abbey's vast lands more like a corporate estate.
A huge shift in vibe, basically.
Massive. And then in 1742, it was elevated to a full cathedral. So the identity of the space had shifted from a secluded monastic retreat to a wealthy institutional seat of power.
Which made it a massive target.
Absolutely.
In March of 1794, the French revolutionaries arrived. And as part of their deliberate campaign to de-Christianize France and destroy the wealthy symbols of the old regime, they took Claude's miraculously preserved body from the cathedral and burned it.
It was a targeted psychological strike. If the town's entire identity is based on this indestructible saint, burning the body breaks the spell of the old regime.
They didn't account for human desperation. Amidst this chaotic destruction, a local man named François-Joseph Jacquet risked his life to intervene. He managed to steal and hide Claude's left little finger and a forearm from the flames.
Which is incredible when you think about it.
Think about the risk there.
Yeah.
If the revolutionaries catch you saving the symbols they were actively trying to destroy, you are going to the guillotine.
No question.
But Jacquet hides them. And 5 years later, in 1799, a massive fire sweeps through the entire town of St. Claude. The sources note that Jacquet's house, where the remaining relics were hidden, was the only one to survive the blaze.
Which naturally cemented the miraculous reputation of those saved fragments.
Of course.
But what's truly compelling is how the devotion to St. Claude evolved after the main body was gone. The physical destruction didn't erase his legacy. The devotion simply adapted to the specific culture of the Jura region.
Right. Today, St. Claude is curiously known as the patron saint of woodturners.
Yes.
Wait, so a guy who ate one meal a day and sought absolute silence in the mountains is now the patron saint of loud spinning wood lathes.
Yeah.
That feels like a contradiction. How much of patron saint assignments are just total historical geography accidents?
Well, it highlights a crucial mechanism of cultural memory. Patron saint assignments are rarely based on a literal one-to-one connection with a person's historical job description.
Oh, interesting.
Claude never turned wood, but the people of the Jura Mountains did. The region became economically famous for its intricate woodworking and pipe making.
Ah, I see.
Because Claude was the protector of the region, he naturally became the protector of their livelihood. He is bound to the people, not to the noise of the lathe.
So when the physical relics are mostly destroyed and a region is plunged into turmoil, the devotion doesn't just die, it becomes mobile.
Exactly. It moves with the people.
And this is how Claude's legacy leaves the snowy French mountains and travels to the bustling streets of Rome.
To trace that movement, we have to look at the 17th century. Europe was absolutely ravaged by the 30 Years' War, spanning from 1618 to 1648. This was a conflict that brought famine, disease, and unimaginable destruction.
Horrible time to be alive.
Truly. And following that, there was the French annexation of Franche-Comté, the region of Burgundy where Claude was originally from.
Right.
This immense political and violent upheaval forced waves of Burgundian citizens to flee their homes.
They became refugees, and many of them made the long, dangerous journey south to Rome. They settled in a specific area where, surprisingly, a street named Via Borgognona Burgundy Street still exists today.
Yeah, the imprint is still there.
By 1650, this group of refugees had organized. They founded a confraternity, basically a mutual aid society. In 1662, they pooled their resources to open a hospice to care for new pilgrims and refugees arriving from their homeland.
What's fascinating here is the sociology of displaced peoples.
Hmm.
When a community is uprooted by war and forced into a foreign urban landscape, they face an existential threat of losing their culture.
They need an anchor.
They absolutely need an anchor. These refugees used religious figures, specifically local ones like Claude, to solidify their identity in Rome. Claude went from being a local mountain ascetic to a powerful symbol of a lost homeland for Burgundian refugees.
So what does this all mean? I liken this to immigrants opening a highly authentic neighborhood diner in a new country.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
It's not just about selling food, right?
Yeah.
It's a physical piece of home, meant to keep the displaced community anchored together. It's a space where you hear your language, share your customs, and support your own.
Exactly.
Eventually, these refugees decided to build their own national church to make that anchor permanent. They dedicated it to St. Andrew the Apostle and to their hometown hero, St. Claude. They named it Santi Claudio e Andrea de Borgognoni.
And the mechanics of how a refugee community finances and builds a Baroque church in the center of Rome is a testament to their organization.
It must have taken a massive effort.
Over decades, through donations from the confraternity and wealthy Burgundian expatriates, they acquired the land and commissioned the architecture. The current church was designed in 1728 by a French architect named Antoine de Resigned.
The architecture itself is an absolute treasure trove of specific choices. De Resigned designed it with a Greek cross layout.
Let's explain why that matters, actually. A Greek cross layout means the four arms of the cross are roughly equal in length, creating a highly centralized space, usually under a dome. Unlike a traditional Latin cross with a long nave designed for massive processions, a Greek cross creates a feeling of equality and intimacy. It forces the congregation to gather around the center.
Oh, I love that.
For a tight-knit community of refugees, it's the perfect architectural choice to foster unity.
And the interior is incredibly rich, too. The pendentives, which are those curved, triangular architectural sections that allow a circular dome to sit on a square room. They feature stunning white stucco representations of the four evangelists set against a gilded background.
Yes.
And if you look straight up into the oculus, the very center of the dome, there is a representation of the dove of the Holy Spirit.
But for all its interior beauty, the exterior of the church presents a glaring historical accident.
Oh, big time.
Originally, the church sat comfortably on its own enclosed square, but centuries later, Roman city planners initiated an urban renewal project.
As they do.
As they do. They decided to demolish the intervening block next to the church to merge two separate piazzas together.
Which means the church's left-hand elevation is now completely exposed to the public.
Yes.
The architectural guides we looked at describe this exposed side as a stark limestone cliff. It's basically a flat, unadorned, bare wall that Antoine de Resigned never ever intended anyone to see.
Never.
The brick building next door even intrudes on the facade in a way the sources call unsettling. Imagine designing a building meant to be seen perfectly from the front, only for city planners to demolish the block next door centuries later and expose the bare side.
Yeah.
Does that ruin the art, or does it just add a new layer of raw honesty to it?
I would argue it vastly improves its historical value because it turns the church into a perfect architectural palimpsest.
A palimpsest being like a medieval manuscript where the old writing was scraped off to make room for new writing, but you can still see the faint, ghostly traces of the past underneath.
Exactly. This building is a physical stack of history. You have the foundational layer of the Burgundian refugees who scraped together the funds to build it. You have the layer of the French national administration that eventually took it over. And you have the layer of modern city planning accidents exposing its hidden framework.
It's all just stacked up.
And the layers continued to stack up internally, too.
We did. In 1886, a religious congregation known as the Sacramentines took charge of the church and reordered the interior. Today, if you walk into the right-hand chapel, you can see the glass sarcophagus of their founder, St. Peter Julian Aymard, inside.
And right next to that 19th century addition in the chapel of St. Joseph, there is an incredibly striking piece of mid-20th century art.
Oh, the painting.
Yes, it's a 1949 painting by Clito Luzzi depicting the flight into Egypt. Our sources note it is painted in a highly realist style.
Wow.
The contrast of this raw 20th century realism surrounded by 18th century Baroque stucco angels perfectly illustrates that palimpsest effect. It's a living document of Rome's evolution.
Not to mention the little palace built by the Brotherhood right at the end of Via Borgognona. Above the entrance, it features the coat of arms of a Burgundian painter named Jacques Courtois.
Right.
He painted battle scenes, and his motto carved there is incredibly evocative. It reads, "Although the sword armed, I am courteous."
That motto perfectly encapsulates the psychology of those original refugees. They were armed by necessity, having survived the brutal devastation of the 30 Years' War, yet they strove to maintain their culture, their faith, and their dignity in a foreign land. They refused to let the violence erase their humanity.
It is amazing how much complex human history is packed into one building. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, it all traces back to our man in the mountains.
It really does.
We started with a 7th century noble who served as a border guard, became a reluctant canon priest, and ultimately just wanted to be left alone in the freezing Jura Mountains to eat his one meal a day and pray in absolute silence.
And he ended up generating a miraculous town-naming economic engine.
Right. Becoming the patron saint of loud woodworkers and serving as the cultural anchor and namesake of a Baroque masterpiece built by displaced refugees in the center of Rome.
Claude couldn't have possibly predicted or engineered any of this. It proves that history is not a neat timeline of isolated facts or carefully executed plans.
Not at all.
It is a wildly complex web of unintended consequences, where a single, profoundly humble life rippled outward to shape centuries of geography, economics, politics, and architecture.
Which brings us to our final thought for today. Think about St. Claude hiding from his promotion to archbishop. In our modern world, we're constantly told to build our personal brand and relentlessly chase the next big title or promotion.
It's exhausting.
It really is. We try to control exactly how we will be remembered. But Claude's legacy survived for 1,300 years precisely because he walked away from power.
That's the real takeaway here.
What is something in your own life that you might actually improve by stepping back from it, rather than leaning into it?
A deeply humbling question to consider.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.